Good morning, guys. So let's go ahead and check out this warm-up. Give it a try. This is a nice little refresh of congruent triangles. So remember, you got your side, 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 side angle, side, and all those fun other options. So think about what they would be and try out those problems. Pause now and come on back when you got it. Okay, so I've done the first two there. If you guys want to just take a look at those should have been pretty straightforward. If you remembered what theorems you could use, and basically all I did was label the parts that were marked, and I decided based off those parts if it was a congruency theorem or not. Okay, so 3 and 4, these ones are a little more interesting. So with these ones, they give you a theorem they want you to use, and they want you to decide, well, what other piece do I need to be able to use that theorem? So we're going to look at 3 together, and then I want you guys to pause and then look at 4 and try that one. So you look at 3, it says we want to prove by side, side, side. So if you look at the picture, what we're given here is one pair of sides in both triangles. So we got that one pair of sides. And I'm going to just mark the triangles here so we can see the two different ones. So what we need to do is we need to decide, okay, well, what other piece do I need in these triangles to prove side, side, side? So if we look, we've got one pair of sides. That means we need two other pairs. But first off, we have this reflexive property pair here. So they don't need to give us that because that's that reflexive property. So that's another pair of sides there. So all we need is that third pair of sides. And so that third pair of sides is going to come from the only pair of sides left. So what we need to say is that we need QR to be congruent to QY. Okay, so that's how you would do that problem. So what I want you guys to do is check out number 4 and see if you can figure out what piece you would need. So pause now, take a second to think about it, and then come back. Okay, so with this one, we want to prove hypotenuse leg. So to do that, we have to look at is, well, what do we already have? Well, we already have, this is a right triangle. And we also have this reflexive property side here. Remember that reflexive property is where a side is shared. So that, what we have to do is then decide, well, that would be a leg of our right triangle. So now we just need the hypotenuse. So if you guys remember, the hypotenuse is always the side opposite that right angle. So where's the right angle pointing? So that means we need this side to be congruent to this side, because those are both of our hypotenuse in both triangles. So all we have to say now is that KJ is congruent to YI. Okay, so if those two are congruent, then it would be congruent triangles by hypotenuse leg. So just a neat way we'll look at triangle congruence. Alright, so quick warm up there. Let's take a look now at what we need to learn for today. So today we're going to talk about something called right triangle trigonometry. So to do right triangle trigonometry, what we need to do is figure out these right triangle trigonometric ratios. So if you guys remember, ratios are like fractions. They're like a number over itself. So it's going to have like a something over something else. So with right triangle trig, we're always going to be dealing with those ratios. So once we figure out what those ratios are, we're going to look at, well, where do those ratios actually come from? How can we figure them out? And then finally, we're going to look at how can we use those ratios to actually find missing parts of a right triangle. So those are the 3 things that we need to look at today. So let's go ahead and get started. You guys should have a note sheet and a foldable sheet. So make sure that you have both of those sheets, because we're going to be working back and forth with each of those sheets today. So what we're going to start with today is the notes sheet. So the first part of that note sheet looks exactly like you see on the screen right now. So find that sheet so we can get started with those first problems. So to start out right triangle trig, what we need to do is we need to get some basic skills down before we can actually do right triangle trig. And those basic skills have to do with identifying the sides of a right triangle. So let's take a look at this first question. It says, identify the hypotenuse of the following triangle. So we're going to look at the triangle and we have to identify the hypotenuse. If you guys remember, the hypotenuse is always the longest side, and it's also always opposite that right angle. So if you find the right angle, figure out where's that right angle pointing to, that's always going to be your hypotenuse. So I would go ahead and write hypotenuse right here on that triangle. And if you want to write the hypotenuse in this case is AB. Okay, that's all it's really asking you to do. Let's take a look at the next one. It said, what side would be opposite to angle B in the above triangle? Okay, now this is important. It says, what side would be opposite of angle B? So before we do anything, we have to figure out, well, where's angle B? So you come up to your triangle. Here is angle B right there. Now, if I want a side that's opposite that, what that means is I need to go across the triangle to get to it. So it's kind of like, what is that angle opening up to? What side is this angle opening up to? And that would be this side here. So this is going to be our opposite side, because the triangle is opening up to that side. So what side is that? Well, that is side AC. And then finally, we're going to take a look at what side would be adjacent to angle B in the above triangle. So we're still at this angle B here, but we want to know what side is going to be adjacent. And what this means, and I would write this in your notes, I'd write that on the paper. Adjacent means next to. And if you didn't write it for opposite already, before we move any further, write across the triangle. Okay, so adjacent, back to this one. Adjacent means next to. So what we're going to look at is what side is next to this angle B up here. Now, this side I agree is next to, but that side's the hypotenuse, so we can't use it. So the only side left is going to be that side. So this side is going to be our adjacent side. So that means that CB is the adjacent side. So that's the basic skill that you guys need to have to be able to do right triangle trig. You have to be able to identify what the sides are, opposite, adjacent, or hypotenuse, based off of a given angle. In this case, we were given angle B. Alright, let's take this a step further and get some more practice with it. Let's look at this one. So, looking at these two, this isn't anywhere on your note sheets. This is just on the board here. So no need to copy it down. Just kind of take a look, see what you get there, and then you'll have some practice that you can do afterwards. So again, it says identify the adjacent side, opposite side, and hypotenuse based off of the angle this. So I think we talked about this before, but this is what we use to represent an angle, and it's called theta. So anytime you see that symbol, most likely it's going to be an angle of some sort. And in this case, it's going to be an angle in a right triangle. So what we're going to do is we're going to identify adjacent, opposite, and hypotenuse based off of the angle that's marked. So we look at this first one here. There's my angle. So what I like to do is I always like to identify the hypotenuse first, because that's based off of this right angle, and it's just whatever's opposite the right angle. So it's also always the longest side. So this one has to be my hypotenuse, because it's the longest side and it's opposite that right angle. Then from there, I look for my opposite side. So I look for the side that goes across the triangle from my given angle. So the side that's across the triangle from my given angle is this side. So I went across the triangle. So this is the opposite side, and I abbreviate that OPP. And then finally, I look at that adjacent side. So the adjacent side, remember, means next to. So I look at the side that is next to my angle. This is going to be my adjacent side, and I abbreviate that ADJ. And that's it. Same thing every time. All we're doing is we're identifying where's the opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse. This is a very important skill to have down to be able to do right triangle trig. Let's look at the next one real quick. Again, we want to identify opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse based off of this angle here. So again, start off with your hypotenuse. That's opposite that right angle, whatever the right angle is pointing at. So that's my hypotenuse. This is my opposite side. Oops, I switched colors. Let's change back to that red so we're consistent here. Opposite's going to be across the triangle. And then whatever side's left, in this case this side, that has to be my adjacent because I've used all my other sides. And also, guys, if you want, you can abbreviate hypotenuse as HYP. So that's really the basic skill you guys need to have. So I want you guys to do, use these two as examples and try those next problems so they look like this. Try these problems, see if you can identify the opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse based off of that given angle theta. Go ahead, take about 5 minutes to do this, pause the video, and come back and the answers will be up for you. Okay, so hopefully you were able to get these as your answers. So if you need to, you can pause and check those, see if you have any questions. If not, feel free to go ahead and let the video move on and see what's next. Okay, so this next one, let's go ahead and read these directions. So again, this is not in your notes anywhere. This is just on the board. I want you to take a look at it. You have some examples in your notes afterwards. So it says identify the acute angle that would make the identified side correct in the following triangle. So what we need to look at is this side that's given. So we're given that side and it says that it is the adjacent side. So what I need to do is I need to figure out which acute angle is that side adjacent to. So if you look at your triangle, you only have two acute angles. You've got angle D here and you've got angle E here. So what we need to do is decide which one of those angles is adjacent to this side FE. So adjacent, if you guys remember, means next to. So what angle is next to that? Well, that would have to be angle E. So this is our theta for that problem. And that's all you have to do for those, just identify that angle. Alright, so if you look at your paper, you got 8 more problems just like that. What I want you guys to do is use that previous page as an example. I'll jump back to it here in a second. And try to answer those questions. Just mark where your angle theta would need to be based off of the identified side. So I'm going to jump back. Go ahead and pause the video now. Take about 3 minutes for those. And come back when you guys are finished to check your answers. Alright, so let's take a look at these answers real quick. Alright, so there we go. Those are the answers you should have gotten. So basically all we did was identify what angle did we need for that to be the opposite side. So it either could have been this angle or this one, and I picked this one because that means it is opposite. So if you check each of those, check those out, see if you have any questions. If so, feel free to ask. If not, feel free to move on with the video. Okay, so last piece here. What does this basic skill do for us? So what's the whole point of doing this basic skill? Well, what it does, it helps us find those right triangle trigonometric ratios. So before we talk about what those ratios are, let's talk about what those trigonometric functions are called. You guys might recognize these from the buttons on your calculators. So these right triangle trigonometric functions are called sine, cosine, and tangent. Now these are abbreviated sin, cos, and tan. And those are the buttons you're going to see on your calculator to do these functions. So we're going to wrap up this video. Pause, make sure you got all these notes down, and then we're going to start a new video, and we're going to be starting on that foldable. So once you get these notes down, go ahead and get out your foldable, and we'll come back to the note sheet after that.